Host Melissa Rosenblum is one of only a few women certified by the Supreme Court of New Jersey as a criminal trial attorney. When you add kids, a booming law business, and a little black book full of subject matter experts, you've got the Mighty Merp podcast.
Welcome to the Mighty Merp podcast. Today, I have the honor of speaking with retired Judge Mark Sandson, who has been instrumental in changing the recovery court, formerly known drug court system in the state of New Jersey. Welcome, Judge Sandson. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Melissa, for inviting me.
So before we jump in and we talk about drug court and recovery court, I know that you were a Superior Court judge for, I think, about 14 or 15 years. You sat in family and criminal and chancery. Could you give me a little bit about how you became a judge and sort of, I'll just say your origin story from that point on, not from the beginning.
Well, I can start. Can I start with my birth on Krypton?
Yes, that would be great.
Because that's the origin story. No, only kidding. Okay, my origin story is relatively simple. I was born in Atlantic City, New Jersey, went to Atlantic City Public Schools, attended Atlantic City High School. I went to college, then I went to law school, and I graduated from law school in approximately 1978. At that time, the question was I going to stay in Atlanta, where I went to law school, or was I going to come back to Atlantic City? I decided that I wanted to come back to Atlantic City. I got my initial job at the Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office for about 3 years. After that, I went to work for a small law firm on New York Avenue in Atlantic City. I practiced law for approximately 29 years. I did mostly real estate and in a way, governmental relations issues. I did a lot of work for various casinos, mostly real estate, and I was the counsel to the New Jersey Casino Association at that time. I was offered a judgeship by our then state senator, Bill Gormley. Towards the end of 2006, I accepted and became a judge, I think the very, very beginning of 2007. I had never handled a family law case prior to 2007. I had been a lawyer for almost 30 years by that time.
Is that where you started in family?
Yes. Generally, I followed the pattern, and what they do generally is put new judges in family, although that has changed somewhat in this day and age. But in that time, it was the normal pattern. So I became a family law judge in Atlantic City. And I was a family law judge for between 4 and 5 years before I went over to be in the criminal division the first time. I was in the criminal division the first time approximately 3 years. Thereafter, I became the chancery judge. The chancery judge handles real estate lawsuits, mostly involving real estate. And at that time I was doing mortgage foreclosure, so I was extremely busy because it was in the height of the mortgage foreclosure disaster. So I handled that for 3 years. Then I was given an opportunity to go back to the criminal division and handle what was then the drug court, which I really wanted to do. And that was where I finished the last 5 years or so of my career. I spent running the drug court in Atlantic and Cape May counties, which was really my favorite assignment. And that's how I ended my career in 2020.
That's what I was going to ask.
When I turned 70.
I was going to ask what your favorite assignment was. Well, when you went back to criminal, which was handling the drug court, it was sort of big news that you were stepping down from Chancery Court, because that's sort of an honor, correct, to have that?
Yeah, I mean, Chancery is generally considered to be a plum assignment. You handle a lot of complicated cases and, intellectually stimulating with very good lawyers, so forth and so on. And I enjoyed it as far as it went, although it was mostly when I was there, mortgage foreclosures and some other stuff. So, but I was very eager. I was always eager to have a crack at the drug court problem. And we can talk about what the drug court problem was,
right?
Whenever you're ready.
I do want to talk about the drug court problem, but it's fair to say when you took over drug court at the time, you had a mission. Is that fair to say? You had a goal.
I did. I had a goal.
And what was it?
My goal was to expand the drug court. Now, this is, and I'm being totally honest here, the judge who preceded me was a guy by the name of Michael Connor. Michael Connor was the first drug court judge. He was an incredibly good judge, incredibly knowledgeable about substance abuse, and frankly, a mentor to me on how you should do it. I, however, did have a mission, and I wanted to go a slightly different way. I wanted to make it much more inclusive in terms of bringing more people into recovery court, and run a model which I thought, in my mind, would lead more people into recovery. For instance, when I came, there was in Atlantic Cape May, there were fewer than 500 people. I think it might have been at like 300 or 400 people in recovery court. By the time I left, there was close to 1,000, if not over 1,000.
And so
I expanded it.
So you and I, I'm a criminal practitioner. I've been doing criminal law my whole career. And so I know the answer to this. And were in criminal court for at least 8 years sitting as a judge. You know the answer to this. But why is recovery court or drug court so essential in a criminal justice system for people that might not know?
And I will tell you, as soon as I took over in drug court, I had a meeting. If you recall, you were there, and your partner at the time was there, and all of the other private practitioners of the criminal law were there. And I had a meeting with the prosecutors, who constitute the bulk of people probably who appear in the superior court criminal system. And my mantra was this. Is there any doubt that probably 75%, if not more, of the cases appearing in the Superior Court Criminal Division, which means indictable cases, are created by substance abuse issues, alcohol, opiates, cocaine, at that time marijuana, which was never really the bulk of what we did, and that in many cases in New Jersey law, which has changed slightly since then, if you had 2 or more drug distribution charges, which included possession with intent to distribute, there was a mandatory jail sentence under a doctrine which was known as the Brimage Law. So all of these people who had substance abuse problems were going to state prison where they were not getting help. So I thought at that time that the appropriate thing to do was give more people a chance to get in. And then when they got in, which was very, very common, they messed up and they relapsed, not immediately kick them out or send them to state prison. Because when you plead into drug court, and this is still the case, you're pleading in to an alternative sentence. You're saying, I'm going to go to drug court till I graduate, or in the alternative, if I fail out of drug court, I will go to X years New Jersey state prison. That was the plea. It's an alternative plea. So I was very slow on the trigger to send people to state prison, and in an experiment of trying to find out what will work, what will make my retention rate higher. We started out with a retention rate of just over 50%, and we ended up with a retention rate of almost 90%.
So then the question is, what worked? What
worked was as follows. There was a whole sanction regime that had been set up officially by the state drug court, that after the first relapse, X would happen, the second relapse, Y would happen. And one of those X's or Y's, or certainly by the time you got to Z, you would get kicked out of drug court and you would go to state prison. I never liked the outcome. I never thought that state prison was the appropriate place for people who had substance abuse problems. Now, people, when you talk about drug distribution, there's really something that has to be pointed out. Most of the people who distribute drugs on the streets of Atlantic County are not El Chapo. They are not there with thousands of bags of heroin, and they don't have under distributors, this, that, and the other thing.
They're not making millions of dollars.
Most of the people who are selling drugs are addicts. They're substance abusers themselves. So they would. So the reality, they were dealing to use. They were dealing so they could use. They were not. They were in effect, and they were clinically attributable. They could be clinically connected to having a substance abuse problem. So whereas there was a reluctance in the prosecutor's office initially, they would say, Judge Joe Blow or Mary Blow or whoever it is a drug addict. I'd say, I know that. That's why they should be in recovery court. But they're a drug dealer too. I said, I know that because many people who have substance abuse problems cannot work. And as a result of that, how do they make money to buy drugs? Because they need them, because they have a disease, and that disease is addiction. How do we really make them change? How do we introduce them to a different way of life? And so, what I tried to do was to get more people through the system and have them graduate. And upon graduation, they were entitled to a total expungement of their entire criminal record, which, as you know, in many cases was 40, 50 cases.
Right. And that was pretty new too. That I like to call it the bonus of drug court, recovery court success. The first bonus is that you're clean and you're able to have a life of, a healthy life, that you're no longer in the criminal justice system. But the second benefit or bonus was your record would be expunged. But that only came into place around 2019, 2018?
Yeah, I'd say 2017. Mm-hmm. That would be my guess. Mm-hmm. So it was a very and it became a very successful program. It still is to this day in Atlantic Cape May, a very successful program. And so what I tried to do in drug court was to, and that the story of recovery court is another story that I'll get into. I tried to figure out how can we help people change? What changes people? What are, and this is, I'm going to use a big fancy word, criminogenic factors. Now, theoretically, if you look at the various academic studies which have been filed, a criminogenic factor, for instance, homelessness, tremendous criminogenic factor. A criminogenic factor is a factor which makes people commit crimes.
Okay. And so you were looking at those factors.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out what makes people commit crimes. Obviously, people who addiction or substance abuse, which is a word that's used more than addiction, at least it should be used more than addiction. Substance abuse is a prime criminogenic factor, as is mental health problems. But I was looking for, and the problem is mental health, very difficult to deal with, for a judge to deal with. I'm not a professional in that trade. Homelessness was something that was a huge problem and was criminogenic. But were there any factors underlying that? Homelessness, poverty, economic disparity, all the problems that we have in our society. Mm-hmm. And so what I started to do very early on in my tenure in drug court is to ask people, where do you work? And they would look at me in surprise, and this is when they were pleading into drug court. And many people were saying, I really don't have a job. And then if you drill down deeper, when was the last time you had a job? And you'd have 35, 40-year-old people, men and women, saying, well, Judge, I've never had a job other than selling drugs. Mm-hmm. So, I realized that there was a nexus, at least I thought there was, of unemployment, chronic unemployment, and addiction, and substance abuse and criminality. All those things were somehow connected. Now, that is not a very brilliant deduction, and it's not as though I'm the Albert Einstein of the criminal system.
You are by no means saying you were the first person to come to this realization or conclusion.
At least I very much hope I was not. But I did come to this realization. We did a very early survey of all the people in our recovery court. We found that approximately 80% of our people in our recovery court were unemployed when they, and this is pre-COVID, when there was maybe a 4 or 5% unemployment rate. And so we had this huge unemployment rate. A huge amount of those people have never been employed, and many of the people who profess to be employed, I'm not unemployed, I'm employed, were working as casual day laborers by the hour, under the table, off the books, with no benefits. And the problem with that is you're the last in every line. You don't have benefits. You go take your kids to the hospital. You got to wait 8 hours when all the people with insurance go before you. It's not supposed to work that way, but it does.
Thank you for listening in. Stay tuned for the next part in this conversation. Mighty Merp is available on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite apps and players. But the best way to experience the show is to visit mightymerp.com, where you can subscribe, rate, or submit a voice message to the show. That's mightymerp.com. Mighty Merp is a production of the Law Office of Melissa Rosenblum and the Niche Podcast Network.